Hello, selectors, and welcome to the Lifeburst podcast, where we're going to review Vertex Diva. There's a lot of Lrigs to go through today, and that's what we're going to do on our first review, is talk about the Lrigs per the usual. And we are going to rate them in all of our set reviews as staple, optimal, viable, and then unplayable. As always, reminder that when we go through, because this is an internal format, ratings on stuff get harsher and harsher because there's more and more of a card pool for it to compete against. But usually there's a little bit of power creep, so these things sort of push other things out and are usually the better versions themselves. But let's get right into it. There's a ton to talk about with a new team, some updates to an old team, as well as some dream team options here. We're going to start with the new team stuff, which is going to be the Deus Ex Machina team. And we're going to start with X. This is going to be the one that you get in the starter deck. And so these guys, the Deus Ex Machina team, have a sort of gimmick, and their gimmick is souls, right? That you're going to see, and I can go down here to show you, the level 1 and level 2s of the center Lrigs actually have abilities attached to them. But they're kind of like enchant creatures in Magic, or enchantments in Magic in general, where you attach them to creatures or your Signy. You're augmenting your Signies with their abilities. So when we review the center Lrigs of this team's, we actually do need to review what they do with their souls, because it gives it gives that center more text than you'd think originally on this. So let's just start at the top here with the actual center level 3 Lrig X. X has the grow cost of 2 per the usual. It's a red 1. Whenever a soul is attached to a Signy on your field, you can discard a card if you do draw a card, right? And realistically, this is only going to happen twice. So you should be thinking this as 2 instances of discarding cards and 2 instances of drawing cards. So that's good when you have stuff that triggers off of you discarding cards. Plus, it's always good to just have better card quality in your hand in general. So this is not the worst. It's not amazing. It's no draw to the card for certain, but it is nice to know that you at least can filter a little bit. You have its action ability of being able to attach a card underneath this to target Signy on your field as a soul. So, okay, you can attach your 2 souls to things later down the lines. Now, this means a couple things. One, it's an action ability, and it costs nothing, and it doesn't have any limits, so you can do this. You can do both souls at once. You can do multiple souls at the same time, or you can do just one at a time if you want to piecemeal it. It also means that this doesn't necessarily play well with those exceed cards anymore, because if you're giving off those souls to an exceed cost, it's not so great. We also then see that there is an actual exceed 3 ability, and it's once a game action ability, which is to remove a piece in your Lrig deck from the game. If you do, you can target up to 2 red Signies on your field, and they gain Assassin until end of turn. Okay, so what do we learn from this? It means, one, you really don't want to play any of those exceed spells anymore. You can as sort of something, but you should be knowing that when you use the exceed cost, it's a very real cost for this type of deck. And it also means that you potentially are getting rid of some of your pieces in your Lrig deck. Now, that's actually less of a cost than you might imagine. Most decks in current metas run 1 main piece, and then run a piece on the side that is good as sort of like this is good if I need it. If I don't need it, it's just extra, right? That could be end of turn, for example, or that could be Xenocluster, for example. And if you don't need the Xenocluster in this game, all right, you just pitch it. And if you pitch it, and instead of drawing a card, you're able to get 2 more Lifeburst damage, because you're able to attack with Assassin on red Signies to basically win the game out. It's much better than your potentially your Xenocluster. So the exceed cost also means that you're going to be exceeding not from under X, but you'll be exceeding the other 2 assists. So there's no exceed like 1 stuff right now, so realistically, exceed 3 is going to be your most that you're going to do. You're going to use these souls, and then you're going to exceed. You can exceed the level 0, I suppose, in X as well. But yeah, it's going to limit the amount of exceeding you can do. Now, if we're going to rate this straight up, now that we've talked about it. Oh wait, actually, my bad. I just said we needed to talk about what these souls do. It really depends on what the souls do. And the level 1 soul gets whenever this Signy attacks, you can draw a card or enter charge 1. Drawing a card is always passable with attacks. Like it's a fine thing to have. It's always good to have more card advantage. In red, getting some more card advantage to help you get closer to the end of the game might be a good thing, for example. But enter charging is actually, it's not super rare in red, but it's uncommon. And any time that red gets it on any playable version of it, it ends up being pretty good for them. So this ends up being a good mix. It doesn't affect the field is an important distinction to note. And because of that, it's actually not as good. But it affects the hand and the enter, which is your resources. So it's okay there. Resources are less of a concern in Wixoss. But this being able to enter charge when it attacks can usually maybe, for example, if you put it on Hera, it pays for Hera's ability, so you're less enter starved for it. Therefore, Hera is probably going to become better with X specifically because of this thing. So it has its functions here. You also are going to be able to play it if you want to have these things that were like, if you enter charge this turn, you can then do this type of thing. This will allow for that as well. The next one is X2. Now, X2 is very good. X2 is the Signy that's got the soul attached to it, gets whenever it attacks, you can vanish target Signy on your opponent's field with power 12,000 or less. Now, the fact that it's doing it on attack means that you're not enter charging your opponent for them to use assist Lrigs against you. So it's actually a step up than the normal amounts of vanish that red gets. But it also specifically hits 12,000 or less. Now, one of the issues of you moving off of like no limit Hirana red deck is that you're going to lose Rose Quartz, and Rose Quartz gives you late game lane opening that red usually lacks. Well, okay, X2 gives you that in your Lrig deck, so you're always going to have at least access to one wall removal-esque type of effect. So this is particularly good in red. All right, now that we've reviewed it all, actually, what do we put this in? I'm going to put it down as staple. If you were to read this card very, very, very bluntly, what you see is it says that you get to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. You can gain Assassin on 2 things, and you also have a removal effect on one of your souls. Therefore, it says, inevitably, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, deal 3 damage to the opponent. Any red deck would be freaking out about that type of effects. That is an utter madness type of effects. Yes, it also probably draws you a single card or enter charges you want as well. So if you look at that and you compare it to Hirana, you can clearly see that this is a step up. So this is going to be a staple. Not to mention, the team itself, DXM, are a red and black team. Black ends up being a little bit more aggressive than white or blue as a team, so you end up with a bit more of aggressive cards. So if you're looking for hyper aggro, X is going to be your new love for this, basically. Moving right along, now that we finally got through X, let's talk about some other stuff first. We'll talk about Trey, the Opened Door. So this is the new for Ancient Surprise. And it's pretty much an upgrade for on all fronts. So if you like it's a good upgrade. Now, whether or not this is better than Bang is a questionable decision, or even Senga is a question you can make a questionable decision on, but it does something that the others don't do, which is it kind of has a built-in engine on its own. At the beginning of your attack phase, it's a level 3, grow cost is 2, it's green. The beginning of an attack phase, you can target a Signy on your field, and it gets plus 5,000 power till end of turn. Its enter ability allows you to take 2 target Signy without guards from your trash and put it into the enter zone. Now, that part does matter a little bit because that is a slight upgrade to enter charging. Yes, you need stuff in your trash, but you will have stuff in your trash. And normally when you do this, being able to choose what your enter, putting into your enter, especially in green, which can take things out of the enter or likes to see certain things in the enter, is an advantage. It's action once a game abilities, you can put 7 Signy that do not share a class from your Signy zone into your trash, put all Signy on your opponent's field into your enter zone, and then you get to enter charge 2. So realistically, this is less damaging to your enter than you think it is. Yes, it costs 7, but it refunds you 2. So realistically, it costs 5, but you do need to have 7 cards that don't share a class that are going to the enter zone. This normally would be a problem for most decks because several colors basically just use certain types of Signy. The difference is, though, it's impossible to talk about Ancient Surprise in this set without also talking about Worlds Reverse. We will talk about Worlds Reverse more when we actually go over all the pieces, but the important part to note about Worlds Reverse is that it distinctly gains you an advantage for running multicolored Signy, and multicolored Signy usually have very different Signy types than normal Signy do. So it actually is, just to say, this is a less of an issue. It also is worth mentioning that this piece can enter charge you quite a bit, often more than what GGG can enter charge you. So getting 7 Signys that do not share a class from your enter zone is not all that difficult for AT to do. It is still a challenge and something you need to build around. But unlike a lot of these older Lrigs where their once a game ability was not all that great, AT's is actually pretty good. It is something that is pretty uncommon in green, is to just basically wipe the board. And this does wipe the board. It's worth mentioning, too, that it does not target, so it gets around Shadow, it gets around various Vanish effects, it gets around Exa, for example, which is going to be a big card in this one. So it doesn't trigger a lot of effects that normally would trigger if this would be Vanish, if this blah, blah, blah. It also notes that it does not vanish it, it puts it into the enter zone. That is a different type of thing. It means it just gets around it completely. So it is game winning. If you are able to pull off that once a game action ability, you are very likely to win that game. And the enter charge 2 is actually quite relevant because there's things that happen on attack in green that you might want to pay for. And then also just the refund is nice, just to have, okay, I'm still able to do assists if I need to later down the line. The enter charging immediately and also being able to select what you're enter charging for in order to get you to that once a game ability is quite good. And then the ability to choose a single Signy and give it plus 5,000. 5,000 is quite a lot. And normally with any other pump that you might have, like for example, if you have out a, let's say, a Osagetsun or a Bacteria, or the Outcast one that I'm brain farting, Azathoth, I think it might be the name for it. That is this Ancient Surprises, one of their team Signys. Giving things plus 10,000 power is not uncommon, and there's quite a few cards that if you give them 10,000 powers, they're ridiculously strong. Not to mention you are in the color of Terror Beasts, which also have Team Pump as well. So I'm not going to call this a staple. I'm going to call this optimal because at the end of the day, the drive that you're going to want to play Ancient Surprise is going to be you want to play Worlds Reverse. But this probably is the best way to play Ancient Surprise, and it's actually quite a good Lrig too. So you're going to go with optimal on it. Once maybe viable without Worlds Reverse, but the minute you throw Worlds Reverse in there, you've got a quite an optimal deck. So between those two, it's probably optimal. Let's talk about Akino Bound for Tomorrow. The first thing I'm going to say about Akino Bound for Tomorrow is that it's a white Lrig with grow cost 2. It is team no limit, but you'll note that this is the first time we're starting to see things, I guess AT as well didn't have it, but this is the first time we're starting to see reasons to maybe not necessarily be on a specific team, right? You can be on a dream team with this because you don't see any of that triangle aside from it saying next to no limit. There's no triangle on any of its abilities, therefore it is not, any of these things are not triggered by having the team no limit. So all of these abilities will work no matter what assist Lrigs you put on them. With that out of the way, you got yourself a level 3 2 cost white grow center Lrig with the following abilities. At the beginning of your main phase, you may put a white Signy on your field to its trash, and then you can pay a white. If you do, you can return target Signy from your opponent's field to their hand. When this enters, you get to draw a card and enter charge 1. And then your once a game action ability is during your main phase and the attack phase. It's during the main phase and attack phase of your opponent's next turn, so not your turn. The Signy on your field gains Shadow. Okay. This is better than the original Akino. The original Akino kind of had a confusing mentality as to what it's trying to do. It didn't really have a defined identity. This Akino has a defined identity. This Akino wants you to put out Signy that are difficult to interact with for your opponent. And once it does that, you want them to last to your turn. And then when they last to your turn, you can trash them and you can pay a white. And when you do, you can open up lanes, right? So this is truly mid-range, finally. You have a reason to put in Signy that will withstand attacks from your opponents, and you have a actual win condition, which is opening up lanes and attacking through it, right? And to further that idea, you have a once a game action ability, which allows you to give them Shadow to make them even harder to interact with. Note that, again, it happens on your opponent's turn, not your turn, so they still can kind of get interacted with, so it's not amazing. It's pretty okay. Without getting too into it, because we can talk more about this Lrig when we actually talk about the deck tech that will be created for her, is she very good? And the answer is, I think if you compare her to Lion, the original Lion, the 1.0 Lion, Lion still does a better job pushing in damage and having a better win condition. If you compare her to Nova, Nova still does the better job of being a stalwart defending type of control deck. As a white mid-range control deck, white mid-range deck, I still don't know if Akino really does it. It is better, for sure, and you could play it on Team No Limit, but Team No Limit is usually a little bit more aggro. So you have options to do with this. And I think you probably want to Dream Team this. You probably want to play White Heaven as the piece with this. But I cannot say in good confidence it's all that great. It is a step up above the original Akino. So in that manner, and the fact that we don't have any quote-unquote real mid-range white Lrigs yet, I will say that Akino is viable. It's not quite unplayable, but it's not as good as one might hope, being an Akino stand. But it's better than MC Lion and third verse alts. I'm just going to spoil this one ahead of time, guys. You can skip to the next one in the video if you want. This one's pretty unplayable. There's really no reason I'd play this other than, she's cute. She's got a really nice hat. I like that it says Wixoss on it. A Wixoss branded hat. MC Lion third verse alt is a white center Lrig, level 3, grow cost 2, and it has the following abilities. Auto, once a turn, when this Lrig attacks, you can shuffle your deck and reveal the top card of your deck. If that card is a level 1, draw that card. If that card is a card with guard, crush one of your opponent's life cloth. Its once a game action ability is return target Signy from your opponent's field to its owner's hand. Okay. There's a little bit to bite into here. And that is that when it attacks, you're going to shuffle. That's the part that probably kills this card. You can't. White has a great plethora of ways to manipulate the top card of its deck, and the fact that you're randomizing it no matter what means that the only way that you can do this is if you filter out, you do the opposite of what normal card jockey does, which is even worse, right? If it said level 3 and then it said like spell, then this would be a super upgrade to the original MC line. You'd still play it in card jockey, you'd still run Endless Punchline. The fact that it wants to see level 1s, and the only way that you can manipulate the level 1s in this deck because of the shuffling is to filter out level 3s, level 2s spells, means that you're not going to play this with Endless Punchline. And that's already pretty much a death sentence for this MC line. Its once a game ability allows you to open up a lane unconditionally. Cool. That's okay. I mean, but Nova also does that once a game when it enters. So it's nothing special here. If in the future there is a way to break a deck and have way more guards in it, and you could become guard the deck, then this might actually become somewhat broken. Without that, or without playing, I guess, All-Star, which has the ability to have lots of guards in it, this is not nearly as broken as you want. Like, the most interesting thing about this is the fact that you can crush an opponent's life cloth, but being relegated to only currently 4 copies of a card that can do that, and no great way to filter it to make that be the card, makes this not so good. So this card currently in the Diva format is unplayable. You just won't play this card. It's just not any good, and it won't do the job that you're looking to do. There is a way to play it, and the way to play it is to play with the way to play this is to play this with what do you call it? The Cosmos Signy, right? The Cosmos Signy like to see in a plethora of level 1s. So that's the way that you'd want to play it. I wouldn't even say it's viable, even if you are using the Cosmos Signy's sort of like synergies. There's just not enough of them. It's just not that great. This is something that you're going to want to stick to the original MC Lion with. Nonstop Dr. Tamago. Here's a level 3. It's blue. Its grow cost is 2 blue, and its abilities are as follows. Whenever this Lrig attacks, you may put a card from underneath this Lrig to the owner's trash. If you do, your opponent discards a card at random. Auto. When your opponent discards a card by one of your effects, freeze target Signy on your opponent's field. And then it's once a game ability is each player draws 2 cards. Your opponent discards 2 cards at random. Okay, so I want to talk about something off the top end. Whenever your opponent discards a card by one of your effect, freeze target Signy on your opponent's field. I did ask the US judges about this type of effect and saying, what if they discard 2 at the same time, right? That's different in some card games where it's like, oh, well, they're only seeing 1 instance of discard, therefore it will only trigger once. At this moment, it is believed that it will trigger for each individual discard. That might change. We don't have the official rules out yet for this new set, the official like erratas that come with it, or the reminder text that sort of is on the website. You can always go to Tomi's actual website, hit card list, and then read underneath it. It should have some official rulings for this type of thing. So we'll find out more then. But currently, as it stands, we think the interpretation is that if you use its once a game action ability, that it will freeze 2 things on your opponent's side of the field. Nonstop Dr. Tamago is amazing. It's amazing on 2 different fronts, and here's why. 1, control likes discard, and control likes freezing. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. Discarding your opponent's effect is not conducive to Enter Starving, which freezing is conducive. But control is conducive to Enter Starving, and you can back it up supplementary with discard. Cool. Now that we got that idea in the way, it's also worth noting that this is the first time that you can make Freeze Tribal an actual functional deck. There's been a bunch of different cards. For example, Umir Freeze and Umir Shatter is a very cool assist line that specifically deals with freeze, but it's so uncommon to be able to control your freeze because it's in the main deck and the main deck is randomized. And Dr. Tamago actually gives you control over when you're going to freeze because you have freeze option in the Lrig deck and you know it's always going to be there turn 3 and onwards. You actually need less freeze in the main deck and more discard, which is just generally a better thing to run anyways. And you will also be able to add more freeze effects, like that affect freezing, not necessarily that freeze themselves. So for example, Bradamante is a good card, but the problem with Bradamante is it's a level 1 that you don't always know if there's going to be a frozen thing on your opponent's board. Well, with Dr. Tamago, you do know that there will be one. Also, Bradamante makes the opponent discard some stuff, which could freeze again. So these are all very good things that tie into each other. So Nonstop Dr. Tamago is probably going to have 2 decks that I'm going to be making for it specifically. One's going to be a more control version, and one's going to be more freeze tribal. Freeze tribal is quite good if you are playing mid-range-esque decks a lot. Not necessarily control decks because they just get rid of the freeze and then move forward, but mid-range decks really suffer with freeze. So if you were playing a bunch of mid-range-esque decks, then Nonstop Dr. Tamago is going to be a very good card in your meta, and you could play that freeze specifically deck, and it will be quite good. So anyways, the answer for this is that it should be probably a staple from here on out. Maybe optimal is the right word. I think it'll be quite good, but never overtly amazing. So let's go with top end optimal. All right, Madoka Vogue X3. Here we've got another level 3 blue to grow. Its abilities are auto at the beginning of your attack phase. Each player draws a card and discards a card. Its enter abilities choose one of the following. Your opponent discards 2 cards, or you can freeze target Lrig on your opponent's field. Its once a game ability is if you have 3 or more cards in hand than the opponent, put target Signy on your opponent's field into the bottom of its deck. Okay, cool. So all of those things are good, and the first one is actually probably better than you expect it to be. First off, the art is killer on this one. This is an amazing art. Number 2, the first ability at the beginning of your attack phase, each player draws a card and then discards a card, is very strong, especially in blue. It is the equivalent of at the beginning of your attack phase, enter charge for green, which just triggers a lot of random Signy that you might not expect. For example, this will trigger both Zirconium, and it will also trigger Firefly Squid. These are things that blue likes seeing, is seeing the opponent discard cards, right? Blue also likes seeing you draw cards. It has effects that might be cool if you draw cards, like add power to your Signy. So drawing cards is also going to be a good thing in blue, and this does that as well. It just triggers both ends of those effects for both you and your opponent. So there's a wide swath of Signy that can be enabled by Madoka. Inevitably, if you end up going down the Madoka route, that's what I would focus on in order to make this deck. The enter ability, which is making your opponents discard 2 cards or freezing the Lrig on your opponents, both of those are great. Like, right, repping up some of the what do you call it, the hands, the resources of your opponent is amazing, but also you should note that freezing your Lrig on your opponent's field is also quite good, right? Freezing it could stop team abilities on like team pieces that might be relevant. We're going to be moving away from teams, so it will become less relevant, but it is important to note that there's a lot of different very powerful pieces that trigger on attack specifically. So you can delay that a turn, plus also save yourself a life cloth damage by doing that. The once a game action ability is pretty easy to enable. You're in blue, you should have more cards than your opponent, unless your opponent is also playing blue. So, or white, I guess those are the two ones that really do a great job keeping a full hand. And you will pretty much always be able to free an open lane for it. It requires very little for you to do it. In fact, your enter ability feeds right into your action once a game ability, so you have quite a bit of synergy between all these things. Madoka isn't necessarily blatantly powerful, is the point. Madoka is only going to be as powerful as it synergizes with your main deck. And as such, again, I will give it the optimal rating, because it's quite good, but it's not like, it's not oppressively powerful. Nonstop Dr. Tamago is just blatantly more powerful in the card itself, but this card can enable so much more than what you'd think in your main deck. As long as you're gearing towards that, you'll end up with something pretty good. All right, let's talk about the last parts of the DXM family here. We've got Deus. Okay, so Deus is a black level 3, grow cost 2, has a constant ability of during your turn, the Signy in front of a Signy on your field with souls attached to it get negative 2,000 power. Its action ability is, again, you can attach a card underneath this Signy to target Signy as on your field as a soul. And then its action once a game abilities exceed 3, remove a piece from your Lrig deck. If you do, you can add up to 3 target Signy without a guard from your trash to your hand. Okay, so Deus is a bit of an interesting one. You can play this Lrig as an incredibly aggressive Lrig, or you can play it as an incredibly controlling Lrig. And it weirdly doesn't dabble between the two of them. I know that that's super strange that I'm saying that this can play 2 very different roles, but it can. And that has a lot to do with its souls, right? The level 1 soul is when this Signy attacks, target a Signy on your opponent's field gets negative 8,000 power till end of turn. And then the next one is when the Signy attacks, target Signy on your opponent's field gets negative 10,000 power till end of turn. Okay, so you have an ability on this to basically do a crap ton of lane clearing, right? With the fact that it also has negative 2,000 means it's negative 8,000 and negative 10,000 actually negative 10,000 and negative 12,000. Those are big removals, and you're probably almost guaranteed to at least get 2 removal from it, right? Not to mention, there might be some wacky times that the negative 2,000 matters. Getting an Lrig that just says remove 2 Signy on your opponent's field is very strong, especially in black towards aggro. But its Exceed 3 ability lends itself more to a control deck. The fact that you can pull up to 3 target Signy from your trash and put it to your hand means that you will have a lot of options for what you want to grab, and a lot of them can lead to certain things that will give you synergy between itself, right? You can just grab things that are basically just more removal, right? You can grab Lancelot, for example, or you can grab lane openers like Dark Energy, those types of things, and that is definitely a correct move if you're trying to throw the guillotine down. But there's also ways to grab things that will then grab things from your trash and then allow you to turn on an engine. And that's another powerful way that you can run Deus, is that you look at that bottom part and you say, I'm trading a Xeno cluster to put an engine online. The engine, once it's on, will fill up my hand or wipe out my opponent's field or make it really hard for the opponent to be able to crush my life cloth. Literally, the world's your oyster with this, right? Because you are able to choose what you want. And because of that, I actually like Deus less as a DXM team and more as a dream team, so you can put together whatever engine you'd like to win with the late game. And you can just look at these then as more win conditions as well, right? They just help you get there. The fact of the matter is that also it's important to note that if you can make it so that way you hold off on putting these and your opponent's starting to run out of gas, then these sticking around will get way, way, way more life cloth damage than you want, than the opponent wants them to. So I think this is a better control card than it is an aggro card, but you certainly can just throw it in DXM as a different flavor of X and just rip people's fields up with it as well. Let's move to the last one, which is going to be Maschine 3. Level 3 Black Lrig with Grow Cost 2. Whenever the Signy on your field with a soul attached to attacks, you can put the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck into the trash. It's got the once action ability. You can do it as many times as you want to attach a card underneath this Lrig to target Signy on your field as a soul. And then you can Exceed 3, remove a piece from your Lrig deck. If you do up to 2 target Signy on your opponent's field, get negative 12,000 till end of turn. Cool. And then you look at the Maschines level 2 and level 1. Whenever the Signy attacks, target level 2 or less Signy you get to vanish target level 2 or less Signy on your opponent's field. And then whenever the Signy attacks, you can add a guard, or add a Signy without a guard from your trash to your hand. Okay, so let's talk about this as if all of these are connected, right? Inevitably, what it says is mill your opponent for vanish 3 Signy and salvage a card from your trash to your hand. That's a lot of text. So Maschine is good in the fact that it has a lot of stuff, but my concern with it is that it has a bit of an identity crisis. And the bit of an identity crisis is you can't really tell whether this wants to be an aggro deck, or this wants to be a mill your opponent deck, or it wants to be some kind of hybrid between the two of them. And DXM does not have, it has aggro support for sure, but it has a lot less mill support than, for example, something like Salvage the Future in Diagram does. Diagram also has Langling, which will do it. So there are cards that will get the job done for Maschine, and you can go full mill into this if you'd like, but I don't know if it will be quite as amazing. And if you decide you want to go into being aggro with it, Deus or X might just be better options for the aggro. That being said, you should not sneeze at the fact that what I said earlier, which is if you just had a black Lrig that said remove 2 Signies from the field, then that's quite good. And this one says remove 3, right? It's a whole board wipe. So this card is pretty good. I don't think it's quite as on the level of the other two. So I'm going to rate this one as viable. I think you can get it to work. I think you can get it to win things. But I think all of the strategies that you would use in Maschine, you probably can use in Deus and X, and it would also probably end up more in your favor. That being said, go ahead and run this. It's got an out that the other decks don't have, where because it supports mill, you can potentially win games against walls that you couldn't win otherwise, where these ones would just need to rely on wall breaking. So try it out. Let me know how you guys feel about it. This is my review on the Lrigs in our upcoming set, Vertex Diva. As always, please leave a comment. Tell me what you guys actually think about these cards, what you're excited to run, what decks you're looking forward to. Depending on what decks you guys say you're looking forward to, which of these Lrigs you want me to make a sample deck for you guys first, I might put them out in a different order. So go ahead and let me know. As always, guys, may you always flip a Lifeburst.